Congress is gridlocked on spending and could once again push us over a cliff.
Now that they are back to work after a 7-week break, hopefully they're ready to get some business done.
Hillary Clinton flew into Tampa, and as her lead goes down, she's now up for taking questions.
I'll come back later. Jen has convinced me I need to.
Meanwhile, Trump is piling on and gaining ground.
You can have broad shoulders and still stand with grace and poise on the international.
Plus, we investigate a federal program that gives these people in Florida free medical marijuana.
Uncle Sam is my supplier.
Even though it's banned by the state and federal government.
The epitome of hypocrisy and stupidity.
This is Money, Power, and Politics. Well, on August 10th, when Clinton was up 8 points in an average of national polls, we said don't be surprised if Trump narrows the gap to within 3 points by Labor Day. And now on this day after Labor Day, they are 3 points apart in an average of national polls. Trump, in fact, now has the lead in the CNN poll, and he's making some hay in the swing states.
We're up 3 or 4 points in Ohio. It just came out.
Well, we knew the race would tighten by Labor Day because historically it just does. And this year, after a disastrous run for Donald Trump, circumstances are now working in his favor.
Get some water.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
Well, Trump is attacking Hillary Clinton for a lack of stamina. And while people do in fact cough and there is no substantiation to claims about Clinton's health, her decision to scale back on media interviews for months until now and keep a low profile when Trump ramped up certainly fed into his narrative. And then when you combine that with President Obama getting a chilly reception in Asia while Trump talks tough on Asia, it just plays right into his wheelhouse.
I think it's incredible.
And on top of all of that, Hillary Clinton is still tying herself in knots over her email troubles. First, to the FBI, she claimed to have little training or understanding about the classification process, which begs the question, how can that be if she had security clearances, which requires such training? But then after telling the FBI she didn't even understand that C meant classified, she told us just yesterday she understands the classification system quite well.
I went into the State Department understanding classification. I'd been on the Senate Armed Services Committee for years before I was Secretary of State. I take classification seriously.
Bottom line, Clinton is trying to sit on a lead and run out the clock, and her problem is that we still have 2 months to go. And by showing a little more discipline over the past 2 weeks, Trump can blunt Clinton's primary attack on him.
We saw even more evidence last week that he is temperamentally unfit and totally unqualified to be president.
That's her case in a nutshell. Trump lacks the temperament to be president. But what happens to her if Trump shows up at the debates calm and cool and collected? Heck, he just needs to look sane to counter the main knock against him. And if he does that, when casual voters are just keying into the race, he could pull off a big surprise. Remember, President Carter attacked Ronald Reagan as a showman who lacked temperament to be president, and a cool, calm, and collected Reagan made him pay for that in their debate.
There you go again.
Of course, the circumstances were quite different in 1980. Trump is clearly the underdog this year, and he's been all over the map on his signature issue of immigration.
I'm not ruling out anything.
But if he plays his cards right in the debates, he could turn this race into a nail-biter. Their first debate is September the 26th. And once more, don't be surprised if Clinton loses her grip on the electoral map and they're tied in the polls by the end of this month. Okay, we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. We have a lot of standing water from Hermine that could breed more Zika-infected mosquitoes all across the west coast of Florida. So we'll ask Senator Marco Rubio what Congress can do about that. He'll join us in the second half of our show. We'll also drill into Florida's medical marijuana amendment. Tonight, we'll hear from the opponents of Amendment 2. But first, on the subject of marijuana, we want to show you a contradiction in our drug laws. While the U.S. government bans pot, it still gives it to people right here in Florida, and they've been getting it on your dime for decades. When you stroll down this South Florida beach, you may notice the manicured palms and rolling waves, maybe the sailboat on the horizon, or the lady opening a large tin full of pot. She smokes in plain view, around 10 joints a day. That's 300 joints a month. High-potency marijuana. In Florida, where marijuana for recreational or medical use is illegal, or so we thought.
Who is your dealer?
Uncle Sam is my supplier.
That's right. The same federal government that claims marijuana has no accepted medical use has sent Elvie Mashika nearly 100,000 joints. She gets them to treat her glaucoma for free.
The epitome of hypocrisy and stupidity.
And she's not alone. Irvin Rosenfeld lives near Fort Lauderdale, just down the road from Elvie.
Says use marijuana cigarettes 10 times daily.
He's a stockbroker with a bone tumor disorder who may have set the record for smoking joints from Uncle Sam.
I would guess that I'm up to about 135,000.
The feds have sent him a drum of marijuana every month since 1982, when Reagan told the rest of us to just say no.
Marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States.
The United States federal government has been supplying me 10 marijuana cigarettes per day for almost 33 years. And in the same vein, arresting people for possession or using the same substance that they give me for medical use.
And trafficking marijuana can get you up to life in prison.
Or what? This? That you send me 10 a day?
What would happen to the person who shipped this if it wasn't the federal government?
Let me put it this way, I won't even ship it to myself, and it's mine.
Elvie, Irvin, and others with serious health problems get deliveries of free marijuana at taxpayer expense for life. They enrolled in a little-known program called the Compassionate Investigational New Drug Program. The federal government launched it in 1978, but will not say much about it. The DEA told us it was not authorized to discuss it and referred us to the Department of Justice, which did not return our calls. The FDA, which oversees it, acknowledged receiving our questions, but did not respond to them.
I think it's easier for the federal government not to stir the pot, shall we say.
We know they grow the marijuana in this heavily secured farm at the University of Mississippi.
And we are not doing it as University of Mississippi, we're doing it as a contractor for the government.
It all started with a man named Bob Randall, who successfully argued for medical marijuana in court and got it as part of a legal settlement.
This is a first. I want you to know, Larry.
Then Irvin Rosenfeld became the second man to get free and legal pot from our government. Elvie and others followed until 1992, when President George H.W. Bush cut off enrollment. The FDA would not tell us how many people are still receiving it. We only know of 4, including Elvie and Irvin here in Florida.
They're always surprised. They don't know that the government ever supplied anybody.
And that includes our lawmakers in Washington.
Are you kidding me?
When I went to meet with Boehner's office last year, and they go, what? The federal government gives this out? We had no idea.
How long have you been on it? You smoke how many?
Deborah Washington Schultz's office. What? The federal government gives this out to patients? We had no idea. Nobody knows about this program.
This is all part of a $68 million contract the United States renewed with the University of Mississippi. Check out our YouTube channel for a closer look at this program and other investigations. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe at the top of the page. You'll also find all of our full episodes going back to last year. Coming up, Dr. Jessica Spencer leads the opposition to medical marijuana in Florida. We'll ask her why. Then Marco Rubio joins us as a do-nothing Congress heads back to work, and Aaron Mesmer scores Hillary Clinton's rally today in Tampa.
It's a fraud, folks. And anybody that thinks it's anything other than that, smoking marijuana.
The push for medical marijuana failed in 2014, but this year, medical marijuana is back on the ballot with Amendment 2. Supporters say marijuana for medical use will help people suffering from severe pain and debilitating disease. Opponents say the amendment is vague and susceptible to abuse. We'll cover both sides as the debate plays out, and tonight we'll hear from Dr. Jessica Spencer, who speaks for the opposition. And so please welcome Dr. Spencer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
So the core of your argument is that this amendment would be susceptible or open to abuse, correct?
Absolutely. We're essentially looking at the same amendment that we saw in 2014.
If there were only specific conditions listed, say cancer, AIDS, glaucoma, period, at that point, would you be open to supporting this amendment?
I think the problem with that is that's not what we're looking at.
It's not,
but
if it was,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what would be or what could be. That's not what is. What is what we're looking at and how they worded it, how they phrased it, and what they're putting forth as a constitutional amendment which would supersede all state and local. There's no local control over this. We're looking at the same thing we saw in 2014.
Well, I'm asking because I'm trying to get a sense of the objection that you have only being the fact that it's an open-ended list. So were they to have closed it? That's why I'm asking.
I wish that was my only objection.
That's where I'm going. Your other objection would be?
There's numerous problems with this amendment. Not only is it loophole ridden, again, it does open it up for any condition, much like we see in the California style amendment. What people do not understand is this is not pharmacy. This is bud tenders. These are not pharmacists that are trained. So you're not going to your local pharmacy to pick up, quote, medicine, because this is not medicine. You are going to need to look in California and what we're seeing either by going on Google or wherever to find medical marijuana dispensaries to see what we're actually going to be facing. The difficulty with the other conditions is that they've added conditions and then kept it wide open so that it will be abused.
If it was not wide open, if it was closed, would that be a different conversation in your mind? Would you be open to supporting it?
Oh, I would not be open to supporting it. I support scientific study. I support true medicine through the FDA process. That is not what this is, no matter if you closed it or left it with one condition listed on there, period.
If this were to pass, would violent crime go up?
It could, certainly. That's what we're experiencing in the other states, absolutely. You're dealing with a cash business and you're dealing with criminal entities.
Well, now, I've seen studies, including one from UT Dallas, that showed in the 11 states that passed medical marijuana from 90 to 2006, you saw a drop in violent crime.
I would argue that that's incorrect, and I would go through the law enforcement municipalities, and I would actually also look at the different laws that were in place in those states. That is not what we're looking at here in the state of Florida with this constitutional amendment.
What are the health risks of marijuana?
There's many. Marijuana affects the brain directly. There are obvious impairments to when you're breathing things in. The only thing we're supposed to breathe in is oxygen, not smoke.
To those who look at what appear to be contradictions in drug policy, for example, you have people in Florida receiving joints courtesy of Uncle Sam, our federal government, and others who are saying, wait a minute, I have a debilitating medical condition as well, and I can't get this. You would say what?
The only reason why they're getting that continued from the University of Mississippi is because they went through a legal case to get that. That was a failed study. That's a moot point. We have 3 laws on the books here, primarily Florida Statute 893 that's been around for decades, that allows people to have marijuana under medical conditions through their doctor. But again, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a flawed amendment, a loophole-ridden amendment that's going to be on our ballot, that once you change your Florida Constitution, it is extremely difficult to take it back.
But it can be done. It's been done before. In the United States, you've had an 18th and 21st Amendment. You've had bullet trains here in Florida. It's not impossible if it doesn't work.
But let's be serious. We already know how much money it costs to put something like this on the ballot and to get those signatures. That's incredibly difficult to do. So what will the fallout be in the meantime if that happens? But it won't happen because, again, Floridians are way too smart for this. They can see that this is the same amendment, essentially, that we saw 2 years ago, and they're not going to vote for it.
Dr. Spencer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll drill into Clinton's trip to Tampa and show how she and Trump stack up in Tampa Bay. And we'll sit down with Marco Rubio and ask him why he will not commit to a full term if reelected. So the race between Marco Rubio and Patrick Murphy is tight, and Murphy is attacking Rubio for not pledging to serve a full term if reelected. Meanwhile, as Zika spreads through Florida, Congress still can't agree on a plan to fight it. And that's where we start our conversation tonight with Marco Rubio.
Please welcome Senator Marco Rubio off the top. Senator Rubio, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So you've seen what this storm has done to the west coast of Florida. What specifically can the federal government now do to stop all the lingering water from spreading Zika mosquitoes from here to Tallahassee?
Well, first of all, I think it's already an ongoing effort to have an assessment of the damage here in Florida. And once it reaches a certain point, there can be a request for an emergency declaration. And once an emergency declaration is made by the president, which I'm prepared to pressure him to do, once we hit those numbers, that assessment has to be made by the state. Then all sorts of FEMA funds and other federal funds become available to help local communities, counties, and the state respond. Part of it will be treating the standing water so that it doesn't become a breeding ground for mosquitoes. I've asked and have been working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that at least $1.1 billion will become available to deal with Zika. And a lot of that money will come to Florida. And then, of course, a lot of that money will also be dedicated to developing a vaccine, which is ultimately the way we need to deal with Zika.
Now, you pledged not to seek re-election, then you changed your mind, then you won the nomination in a landslide, which tells us that Republican voters didn't care that you changed your mind on that. So then why not commit to serving a full term if re-elected?
In the real world, people change their mind every day. And the question is not whether you changed your mind. The question is, why did you change your mind? And in my case, it was because I truly believe there's a lot of work to be done. I didn't like the direction the Senate race was going. And I really believe it's important to have a senator that will act as a check and balance on the next president, no matter who that is. I am committed to serving in the U.S. Senate, and it is a 6-year term. And the only thing I have said is no one can tell you for sure where they're going to be 5 years from now, because things happen in life. But I can tell you what my plans are, and that is to be a United States Senator from Florida, to continue to work hard, to continue to get results, to benefit from the experience I've gathered over the last 6 years, to serve the state over the next 6 years. That's my plan. That's what I'm running for. I'm not running to run for anything else. If I wanted to run, for example, for president again, I probably would not have run for the U.S. Senate in the toughest race in the country, getting into the race at the very last minute after a long presidential race.
You'll find our full interviews with Senator Rubio on YouTube. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics. You'll also find extended interviews with other candidates, investigations, and humor segments on the races of 2016. Coming up, Erin Mesmer joins us with a closer look at Clinton's day in Tampa and how she's fighting the Battle of Florida.
Well, Tampa Bay holds the key to winning Florida, which may well hold the key to winning the White House. And that's why Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton have both spent so much time here already. And Erin Mesmer spent this day at Clinton's rally in Tampa to score it for us.
I think the next 2 days really shows how important the state of Florida is to the Clinton campaign. Consider the fact that the former Secretary of State was here today, and tomorrow, former President Bill Clinton is going to be in Orlando. Now, Hillary Clinton's speech today covered a wide range of topics, but one of her main focuses was her opponent, Donald Trump. Clinton called Trump unfit and unqualified, and she also said he doesn't have the temperament to be president, and she said he doesn't have a clue. Clinton also reiterated several promises that she's made throughout her campaign. She promised to create millions of jobs, work for the middle class, and fight for equal pay for everyone. On national security, Clinton said she would work with our allies and stand up to our enemies, and she promised to defeat ISIS. Now, it's fair to say, though, that Clinton had a rough week last week, and she continues to hear concerns about her use of a private email server and some of the donors to the Clinton Foundation, and those were two things that she did not discuss today. For Money, Power, Politics, I'm Erin Mesmer.
Well, recent polling has given Hillary Clinton a slight lead in the Tampa Bay area. When you look at statewide polling, on average, she's close to a 3-point lead in our state. But as we've seen time and time again, the polls in Florida can turn on a dime. Now, tomorrow, we'll key into the election map and show you how the race may play out in ways you would not expect. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again tomorrow night.